Please welcome AIPAC Chief Administrative Officer and Chief of Staff, Samantha Margolis.
Good evening. So we have a very special opportunity for you tonight, and it's actually somewhat of a workshop. This program was designed with you in mind, our AIPAC leadership. We want to offer you some unique tools and insights to strengthen your ability to lead during this critical time. So we've asked one of Israel's foremost experts in leadership and resilience to share with us the lessons to be learned from the past 2 years. Before October 7th, Glenn Cohen had served in the Israeli Air Force as a helicopter pilot. In a scene that reads like a movie, he was recruited to join the Mossad, and later he went on to become the agency's chief psychologist, preparing agents for the possibility of capture and emotionally shepherding former POWs back to civilian life. Since October 7th, he was designated to be the first mental health professional to meet the hostages upon their return. He led the team that debriefed all 168 released hostages. Today, we talk with the man best equipped to help us decipher the hostage experience and what it can teach about ourselves, our leadership, and our path ahead. Please join me in welcoming Glenn Cohen. Hi. So happy you're here. So just to start out so everybody knows, about a month ago or so, I had the opportunity to be in Israel with Glenn, an amazing group of AIPAC senior staff members. And we did something that we've never done before, which is we had an itinerary that was completely focused on leadership. And all of our speakers talked about leadership, and it was really a remarkable week. And we started the week at Glenn's beautiful home outside of Jerusalem with he and his wife, Orit, and they invited us into their home to talk about many of the lessons that we're going to talk about tonight for a half-day program. And we did the feedback survey, as we always do at AIPAC, and it was the #1 most liked session of the week. So I'm so excited to be sitting with you and to impart your wisdom upon this group.
Well, me too. For me, AIPAC is really like family, and I want to thank everyone who I met over the past couple of years. I feel like we went through the war together. I met so many missions, whether it be Minyan missions, the donors, or staff, board members, leadership, throughout the war and afterwards. So I feel like we really went through this together, and I want to thank you for your support and friendship, and we're now ready to go through the next challenges together.
So Glenn, people might notice that you are wearing something that most of us are not anymore, your yellow ribbon. So can you talk about why you're still wearing that?
Yeah, well, you know, in October, everybody, of course, we were so joyous and relieved to have all the live hostages back, and then finally when all the deceased also came back, there were many people who had ceremonies of taking off the yellow pin. And I also was about to do it, and I said, you know what? Actually, there still are some others that are missing in action, and we still have Ron Arad, the downed airman. Eli Cohen has still not been brought back. So I feel like it's important also as a message, just like we brought that awareness, not to forget there's still others who are left behind, and I feel like this is what we're not going to give up on them.
So we'll get to the hostage experience in a minute, but first I just want to talk about leadership, because you were actually talking about leadership and lessons in leadership long before October 7th. As I mentioned, you have this distinguished career in all these amazing places, but you focused on leadership over the last 10 plus years. So tell us about why that's been your focus.
Well, first of all, I have to admit that I, myself, am not a natural leader. My first leadership role was being the captain of the high school, Ramaz High School varsity basketball team. Go Rams, go Rams! But the truth is, I was chosen not because of leadership qualities. I didn't have, but I was a good ball player. I was the tallest guy, I was the high scorer, and so I didn't have the leadership skills, but you can grow into it. Anybody can become a leader. And I think the ultimate leadership lesson that I learned later on in my career in the Mossad was actually from the Prime Minister of Israel, Yitzhak Rabin. I was once sent on a mission far, far away on Rosh Hashanah, and I was all alone, and then somebody came to meet me, and he said, "You have personal greetings and Shana Tova greetings from the Prime Minister." He had the ability at that time not just to see all the missions that he had on his plate for the State of Israel, but he instructed the head of the Mossad when they had a New Year's greeting at his office. He said, "I want to know who are your guys who are out there doing missions for the country, and I want you to make sure to give them my personal regards." And he did that, and I got that. And after I heard that from the Prime Minister, I felt, oh my God, wow, all of Am Yisrael is behind me. So it just shows, you can be so busy with so many missions, but not to forget the person at the end, and for us to be more people-oriented as leaders. I think that is one of the most important messages. Also, I think as leaders, you don't have to be a CEO of a huge organization with thousands. You don't have to make life or death decisions. Now, leadership, you can have an impact on the world, not just by big decisions, but the little things. As a role model, it's sort of like the butterfly effect. One little flap of the wings, the little things you do as a role model, you can influence. It can be on the way to work, if it's helping an elderly cross the street, or pick up some litter and put it in the trash, or to smile to somebody, and you haven't even made it to work yet, and you can already make a difference. So I think that's an important thing to remember also, that we really can change the world and make an impact, not just by the big things, but every little thing we do as leaders makes a difference.
You started off the week with us last month talking about that, and that theme came through in many other speakers throughout the week, was these little things, and everybody had a story like that, where something small, although the Prime Minister is not small, but where something small can make an impact, and the person might not have even remembered that they did that, and we heard that a lot, and it's a very powerful, important thing to remember.
Wartime.
What about wartime leadership? Is it different when there's wartime leadership?
Oh yeah, that's a completely different ballgame. I mean, in wartime, when you have uncertainty and chaos, that's the difference between regular, let's say, being a manager. You have a playbook. Leadership starts where a manager's playbook finishes. And in situations like that, where there's uncertainty, there's a vacuum, you have to step up. And I know an example, Danny Hagali is here also, and that's a good example of there was a vacuum, and he stood up.
The IDF.
The IDF spokesman. And I, in my small area with the hostages, there was also a bit of a vacuum, and nobody really knew what to do with the first hostages who came back. And I stepped up and helped to create this protocol. And so, thank you. And so that's what we need to do in times of war. And this, we're still at war, even though the war was officially over, or the ceasefire, but we're still fighting on 7 fronts. And you guys are out there fighting the 8th front for us, the front against fighting anti-Semitism and anti-Israel sentiment. You're out there fighting, and during those times, there's uncertainty, and you need to step up and stand up, and you need courage. And in order to have that courage, it helps if you have that why and the meaning, and realizing, okay, I'm doing this with my moral compass, doing the right thing for the State of Israel, for the people of Israel and the Jewish people, and that's what we need to do as leaders during wartime.
So as you and your team met with all 168 released hostages, is there a common theme that you heard from them as they came home?
Yeah, well, first of all, of course, it was hell, and every single one of them described the atrocities and the abuse, whether it be physical, sexual, psychological, and that was horrible. But together with that, they also described the way they coped, and even they actually described that they felt that they grew as a result of that trauma, which is really surprising, especially since most people, including the commandos that I train in POW training and Jews around the world, assume that better off being dead than being in captivity. It's so horrific, and it is so horrific, but at the end of the day, these hostages, 168, went to hell and came back to tell the tale, and they not just survived, but they described a sense of growth. And some of them are definitely experiencing some type of PTSD, for sure, but not all. Many have post-traumatic symptoms, whether it be having difficulty sleeping at night or startle responses from different triggers. But at the same time, a lot of them described not just PTSD, but PTG, post-traumatic growth, which can manifest itself in 5 different areas, either a greater sense of self-efficacy, deeper relationships, a greater appreciation for life, a change in direction. Some people, they were engineers and now they're becoming therapists, or spiritual growth, discovering God, having revelations, discovering a whole new sense of what the world is about. And so all these areas of growth were really amazing to see in people who had gone through the worst case scenario. And I'll say something that might be hard to imagine, but some of them even said, when I asked them, if you had the opportunity to erase this experience of captivity from your life experience, what would you do? And quite a few of them said that they wouldn't erase it. They wouldn't trade it. As difficult and as traumatic as it was, they felt that they had grown from this. They are now a stronger, better person. They discovered all these abilities and resilience, and now a lot of them describe themselves as the 2.0 version. Of course, if they could have changed and saved other people's lives, they would, but their personal experience in captivity, as traumatic as it was, they wouldn't exchange that. Many of them said this. And that just shows that every single trauma, no matter how bad it is also an opportunity for growth. And if you know this as a person or as a leader, if you know this and believe this, that makes you almost invincible. And you can deal and cope with anything.
And learning those lessons. Last year, we interviewed Andre. You were on stage with Dan Senor right after we interviewed Andre, and he said that. He talked about how he wouldn't have changed anything. He's one of the hostages that was rescued, and he said the exact same thing. It really is a remarkable thing to think about.
It is.
It's really incredible. When you met with our staff last month, you talked about the 3 stages that the hostages went through: shock, which obviously makes sense, adjustment, and then, thank God, release and coming home. I think, again, shock and release are pretty obvious. Can you talk about that adjustment phase and how some of the hostages made that adjustment?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's an opportunity to give credit to Viktor Frankl, who described those stages in the camps, but he also, before that, talked about the idea of which he borrowed from Nietzsche: if you have a why, you can bear any how. And of course, Hirsch Goldberg Polin adopted that, and he tragically didn't survive, but he passed it on to other hostages, and I met many of them, and they said, yeah, we survived because we had this why. But beyond that, Frankl also described these 3 stages in the camps, and many of the hostages said, yeah, I read Viktor Frankl. I read Viktor Frankl in high school as mandatory reading, but I didn't remember anything. These hostages read it and remembered and said, yeah, it's exactly what Frankl described. And the most incredible part of that is the adjustment stage, because it shows that even in a traumatic situation, being held 60 meters underground in a tunnel, you can adjust to the situation. And it was manifested in a few ways. One way is in the interpersonal realm. Many of them understood, okay, captivity is also an interpersonal situation because there are captors there, even if they're monstrous Hamas terrorists, but there's still a person there. And they managed to figure out who was the more sadistic, the less sadistic, who they could get along with better, who they could get better conditions from. And so they really figured out and adjusted in an interpersonal way. And a lot of them actually bonded with their captors. And I wrote an article on this. People know the term Stockholm Syndrome, but I refuse to call it a syndrome because that's pathological, I want to call it captivity bonding reaction. And this way, to describe it as a positive and healthy survival mechanism. And so that was one way that many of them actually adjusted, and that was in the interpersonal realm. The other way was as far as orientation and regaining control via orientation and knowing what day or date, what time. Unbelievable. Deep in the tunnels, they kept track of the Gregorian calendar, the Jewish calendar. And when we asked them afterwards, well, when did you shift from the second tunnel to the third tunnel? They said to me, should I say after 497 days or February 1st? Just like that, boom. And they also knew what time it was. They figured out, they adjusted, they figured out the system. The captors would pray 5 times a day. They would get 2 meals a day. The meal was like half a pizza and a few chickpeas, but they already had like 7 different phases, and then they knew when the captors went to sleep. So they knew, they would sometimes say to the captor, it's 3:15, right? And, what? How do you know that? They knew exactly what time it was, which is amazing when you think about it. So it just shows that even in these extreme circumstances, we are all capable of adjusting and coping, even in such extreme cases.
You called it last month these small wins and having that control. And
well, yeah, that's the small wins are a huge way of winning a battle in a war that you can't win at the moment. But they definitely did a lot of that.
so as I think about sort of, what the hostages went through, and I think many of us asked the question, what would we have done? Would we have survived? How would we have made it through? I think about how many of them were IDF soldiers or had IDF training because they were soldiers at some point in their lives. And I'm just wondering, do you believe that they had the ability to survive or cope or get through what they went through? Did their IDF training play any sort of role in that?
Not at all.
It's shocking.
The vast majority were civilians. And so, we have this image, like, the Israeli, Tzabar, the fighter, and that's what, no. These were regular Israeli, Jewish, mostly, civilians. We're talking about 80-year-old ladies, 10-year-old boys, and they did pretty much the exact same things that I teach our commandos in POW training without going through any training. And I can give a couple examples. You mentioned small wins. I mean, that was one classic. That's a term that we use in POW training. We call it small wins because, in a situation where you seemingly have no control whatsoever, you don't control what you're going to eat, if you're going to eat, when you're going to eat, if you're going to go to the bathroom. So seemingly no control. But even in a situation like that, you can find some little things to give yourself a sense of control. And these small wins, they said that to me. They used that term. They said, we had some small wins. Like, kids told me that they made fun of their captors and called them names, not to their face, but they were called the fat guy, the ugly guy, the bald guy. You had Yosef Chaim Ohana was given a small transistor radio, and it was tuned to the frequency of the muazzin to try to convince him to try to go, to pray. And he managed to fiddle with it for a few hours until he finally shifted the frequency, and all of a sudden he hears Galei Tzahal. And okay, but not only that, all of a sudden he hears his father saying, Yosef Chaim, if you hear me, it's your Abba, stay strong, you can do this. And so that's an example, not just a small one.
Many of the hostages talked about either whether it might not have been specifically their family member, although many of them did hear family members, but it's unbelievable.
Yes, yeah, and that gave them strength, and they felt, okay, I'm able to beat them and have these small wins. Another thing that helped them a lot, which we teach in POW training, is what I call Stockdale's paradox. And we teach this in leadership training. James Stockdale was the highest-ranking POW in Vietnam. He spent 8 years in captivity, and he survived it. And they asked him who survived and who didn't survive, and he said the ones who didn't survive were the ones who were too optimistic that they would get released in Christmas time, and they didn't, and they died heartbroken. So he said the way you need to survive captivity or any adversity, and this is something for all of you as leaders, don't just be optimistic. First, be realistic and say, you know what, we have a serious problem here, but at the same time, be optimistic that we'll get through it. It's sort of like hope for the best, prepare for the worst. And a lot of the hostages actually adopted that mindset of saying, okay, you know what, this isn't going to be over in a couple of weeks. It's going to take a while. A 17-year-old boy said, how long, captivity, who do I know is in captivity? Gilad Shalit, how long is he in captivity? 5 years. I'm in for 5 years. One day earlier, that's a bonus. That's the mindset that they had. Not because they went through training, because they have this inherent ability. And it means that these 80-year-old ladies and 10-year-old boys, they have this inherent resilience. And that means that we all have it, because it's the Jewish DNA. It's our collective consciousness. This is what we've been doing for thousands of years, surviving against every attempt to wipe us out. And this is what we're going to continue to do over and over again.
So many of our guests here tonight, they went to a session today earlier with General Kurilla at lunch, and he was talking all about U.S.-Israel cooperation. So I just want to touch on that piece, because there was quite a bit of cooperation between the United States and Israel when it came to the hostages. So talk about that. And we also had two different White Houses, first the Biden administration, then the Trump administration. So tell us about the cooperation when it came to the hostages, and specifically thinking about their release and their recovery when they came home.
Yeah, from my perspective, when I was dealing with the recovery, it was amazing. From day one, literally from October 8th, we felt the support of the American government, and it continued all the way through until today, of course. And I was put in touch with the White House, offered us to speak with the Special Presidential Envoy for Hostage Affairs and with their psychologists, and they shared all of their knowledge and experience from all the hostages that they had recovered. And I remember we had this Zoom conversation. It was in October. I said, okay, and so what can you tell me about children? I said, oh, sorry, zero. And so we had to reinvent the wheel on this one and come up with a protocol for children. But they gave us so much support, also comparing notes. And it was really interesting to see culturally the way the Americans recover their hostages as the hostage will land, like let's say in Germany, being released from Iraq. The FBI interrogator would meet him at the plane and already start asking and interrogating, and they would be isolated from their families for a long time. And so for us, we realized that this wouldn't work in Israel with the Israeli mentality and the families being so involved. So we had to adopt those things. And another thing which they were shocked about was to see to what lengths we are willing to go, not just to bring back our boys and girls who were left behind, but also the bodies of hostages. And I spoke with the State Department, CIA, FBI, Navy SEALs, Delta Forces. This is what they do, and they're like, wow, no other army in the world does this, and it's because that is our secret sauce of the IDF. The most important mitzvah is redeeming of captives, according to the Maimonides, and we will do everything to bring our boys and girls back, even the ones who are not alive anymore. And so those are our Jewish values, and it was nice to see that they were really impressed by that. And of course, later on with the Idan Alexander, when he was released, I was there at the border with Steve Witkoff and Adam Bowler came to the border. Like, they were so involved. So it was really a really incredible feeling.
Personal.
Yeah, completely. And the sense was that we are not alone. America is with us in this, and a lot of it is thanks to what you guys have been doing, all the support. So thanks.
By the way, did your protocol change at all from when the first hostages came home in November till the last hostages? Did it change or evolve, or not really?
Not really.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's
got it right from the beginning.
We did it. We got it pretty right from the beginning. We were more, as time went by, we were even more cautious, because the working assumption was the longer someone is in captivity, the worse his or her condition will be physically and mentally, even though I had a hunch that that wouldn't necessarily be the case. In the end, I was right, but we actually were ready for worst-case scenarios, and paradoxically, and that's part of the adjustment we mentioned before, the longer you were in captivity, actually, you managed to adjust even more, as opposed to somebody like the Nova Festival survivors. They came out, and some of them are having a more difficult time than the hostages who came out because of that time.
So you've mentioned that you've gotten to know AIPAC over the last couple of years, and you now know that we are a group of activists, and we have the best and most effective activists around. So what can the former hostages teach us specifically about activism?
Wow, activism, it's amazing because that was something that so many of you were out there, and Jews around the world were active and rallying, and your goal was to have an impact and influence the decision makers. But what you didn't realize is that you also had an incredible impact on the hostages. And they saw you, they heard you, they knew that you were out there rallying for them, and your activism contributed to their resilience in a big way. I heard this from almost every single hostage who returned. They said they felt you, and your activism had an impact on their resilience, and you helped them survive, which is amazing. And even more than that, recently we even heard the terrible testimony of Albel Yehud talking about how bad she was abused, and she attempted suicide 3 times. But when she saw the rallies and she saw the posters with her face and her boyfriend Ariel's face, and she saw people who didn't even know her were rallying and so active on her behalf, she said, that's it. I'm not going to attempt suicide anymore. And that's amazing. You not just contribute to resilience, you save lives. That is really amazing. So that activism contributed to that. And afterwards, the hostages who returned, they also became active because that became their why. That gave them meaning, also to overcome the survivor's guilt. And they had this new mission. Now that they've survived, they have to look out for the other ones left behind. So they were active, and that helped them. It gave them a sense of agency. And I think it's also all Israelis. I looked at it from the beginning of the war. That's what we need to do, the activism, because in times of war or uncertainty and trauma, we have a sense of helplessness. Trauma is defined as something that is also life-threatening, but you also feel a sense of helplessness. So the way to overcome that is to be active and to do something. And the truth is, it doesn't really matter what you do. It doesn't have to be effective. You just do something. I remember when the Israeli army, the convoys were going into battle, into Gaza, at a certain stage, they had so much equipment and everybody was sending them so much stuff. There would be Israelis along the sides of the road throwing bamba at them. They were bombarded with bamba. And the soldiers, they didn't need it anymore. They had so much. But it was a nice feeling. And people just had a sense, okay, I'm doing something. So it really doesn't matter what you do. Just get out there, you guys and people who you're working with, and convince everyone, be active, do something. It doesn't matter what. Sign a petition, go to a rally, lobby, speak to somebody, wear a button, no matter what. Just do something, be active. That is the antidote to helplessness.
Very powerful. So I think about your role over the last 2 years, and I think for many of us, we can't even imagine being in your shoes and doing what you did and hearing what you heard and developing relationships with many of these hostages and their families. And I've gotten to know you just a little bit, but because you did cry at your house in the best way possible, that you're a deeply feeling person, and that comes from one deeply feeling person to another. And just talk about sort of your coping mechanisms and how you dealt with everything and what the responsibility that was on your shoulders over the last couple of years.
Yeah, well, I developed a couple of techniques. One, I call it the feather technique, because at a certain stage, the first deal, remember 105 hostages were released over the course of 7 nights in a row, 6 different hospitals, 7 sleepless nights, 105 people. Wow, it was really a lot on my shoulders, and at that stage I felt that if anybody dares to even put a feather on my shoulder, I would collapse. And so I said to my wife and my kids, I said, that's it. Nobody, don't ask for anything. Like if my daughter would say, Abba, please help me with the car insurance. So I would say, feather.
Oh, wow.
And that became the code name in the house for the feather technique. And so I suggest that for leaders to be able to say no. A sign of a good leader and successful people are the ability to say no and put down boundaries. So that was one technique. The other technique I called a power cry, because you have a power nap, which a short nap goes a long way. And the same thing as far as crying and getting your emotions out. We're all under stress and so much pressure. It's like a pressure cooker. And so we have to find these valves to regulate and to let off some steam every once in a while. And I remember, and I had to be in operational mode. And you guys also, everybody at their work and their job in AIPAC, you've got a mission. But every once in a while, I would find myself getting emotional. And I'll just share one example. Which is one of the early examples in the first deal when the women and children, mothers and children came out, and there was one teenage girl who shared with us in the debriefing that she had been sexually abused. And that was actually the first testimony of sexual abuse. And so we immediately made sure at the hospital that the hospital social worker was on board and knew what to do, and we somehow took care of that and made sure that she was okay to continue the conversation. And afterwards, I was walking down the corridor, and all of a sudden I just felt the tears welling up, and I started crying, and I just had to slip into some closet, some medical supplies closet, because I didn't want the hostages and their families to see me crying like that. And I let out a really good cry because I realized, it was the first time to realize, wow, our girls have been abused, and that was a tough one. But it was good to let it off, and afterwards I came out of the closet and walked down and back to work. And so I suggest that every once in a while, don't keep it in, let off some steam, and let yourself have a good cry once in a while.
I would think there would have been a lot of those. In my family, we call that a good cry, but I'm going to start calling it a power cry because a power cry sounds a lot better. 2 more questions. One is specifically about if there are any hostages that you saw that really exemplified exceptional leadership. Like I think about Eli Sharabi and reading his book, and he seemed to be like a leader in captivity. Were there any types of hostages where you saw sort of like this sort of next level of leadership sort of come through, especially when they were with others or in the way that they dealt with their captors?
Yeah, well, a lot of the hostages were kept in groups, small groups of 3, 4, 5, 6, and usually in every group there was someone who was considered like the responsible adult. And Eli Sharabi in his group was like that. Ohad Ben Ami was like that in his group. Tal Shoham in his group, and it was quite amazing to see how they really took care of the others, and that became their why. And we spoke about the importance. For many people, the why was to come back to your families. But for a few of them, like those that I mentioned and others, their why became to take care of others.
Gave
and I
them
think,
purpose.
And I think that's also for leaders. It's so much. They also say in the army, when the officer is leading a forced march with stretchers and carrying like 250 pounds on a stretcher and at a forced march, the leader is doing the same thing, but he doesn't feel the load. It doesn't, because he's looking out he's responsible for the other people. So paradoxically, when you help others and look out for other people, it takes a load off of yourself.
Making that impact and having that purpose.
Yeah.
So we've talked a little bit about the year that that AIPAC is going into and that our activists are going into, and it's a period of great intensity, lots going on, lots of things for us to do. And it's really, we've talked about it, it's a long-term fight. It's a long-term battle, but it's a bunch of short, battles with an ultimate goal of winning the long-term war. And it's really testing our resilience as individuals and as a community. So what advice do you have for this incredible group of people as we continue in what is sure to be a challenging and pivotal year and moment in our lives and in our history to prepare us for that long battle ahead?
I think the key thing you said there is that it's long term. I think that's really important. There's always a dilemma, like how optimistic you want to be, how pessimistic. Is this going to be over quickly or not? I remember in the beginning, in October, my wife was hoping that, okay, it'll just be, a couple of weeks and that's it, it'll be over. And we had a son in battle for 2 years. And but at a certain stage, I said to her, you know what, Olit, this is going to be long term, and you have to change your mindset. And I think we all have to realize, even though it's still not over, it's still going to be long. You have to adapt a different mentality. It's not the mentality of a sprinter, but of an ultramarathoner. I run ultramarathons, and there are 3 golden rules of ultramarathoners. 1 is drink before you're thirsty, 2, eat before you're hungry, and 3, rest before you're tired. Because you're going the long haul, so you have to think preemptively. You have to take care of yourselves and your people. Don't reach burnout. Realize that it's long term, and think preemptively and take care of ourselves. Also, the oxygen mask, it's like on the plane. Who do you put on first? Not on the kids or the weak ones who you would think to do that instinctively, but no, first take care of ourselves so that we can help others, and this is going to be a long haul. That's one aspect of it. And I think the other aspect of when you do have a long haul and there are many battles along the way, we're talking about the big picture, you got the war, but there are many small battles. You have to realize you're not going to win every single battle. And that's okay. And also in life, every winner knows that you have to go through the losses. And Michael Jordan has a famous quote about all the lost games and the missed shots and the 36 buzzer shots that he missed. Due to all of those failures, I succeeded. And the same thing, every winner, every leader has to know that it's okay to lose some of the battles, and that doesn't reflect upon the long haul and the big picture, and to be able to accept that and to say, okay, losing something is part of the long haul, and to debrief and to learn from your mistakes. That's the second thing I would say. And the third thing I would say is that to realize that our vacation from history is over, and we're living in historic times, and during these times, we have to really have our why, and to understand that this is a greater cause. I mean, it's a curse and a bless. I mean, all the anti-Semitism and everything that is happening around us, it's difficult, of course, and hard to deal with. But we've also been blessed to be the ones to be chosen at this time to step up, to live in historical times, and to have this meaning to do everything you guys are doing for the state of Israel and the Jewish people. And you'll be able to tell your grandchildren about these times. And we have to go through this together, united. It doesn't matter if it's Israelis on religious, secular, right-wing, left-wing, Israelis, Jews. We'll go through this together, and we're going to make a difference in the long term for the state of Israel and the Jewish people.
Well, thank you so much. It's really been an honor. We're so glad that you came back to spend more time with us and to impart your wisdom about leadership in a time where we really need it, and we'll take it forward with us in the coming year and many years ahead. So thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure.
And you can all make your way to the general session. Thank you for all being here tonight, too.
Right.